Okay, are we good to go now? All right, we're going to go ahead and get the study session for October 11th underway, and our topic today is a project under consideration to develop Memorial Hall into an esports arena, and I will turn it over to staff.
All right, Mayor and Commissioners, Jacob Wood, I'm the Deputy City Manager. Obviously, Mike is out today. We have had a lot of meetings over the last couple of months with the Hutton team. They have some interest in redeveloping Memorial Hall. Before I introduce them, I'd like to have Chris come up to the podium and just kind of talk a little bit about the history of Memorial Hall, kind of where we've been and what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years. So, Chris, take it away.
Mr. Cotton.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Yes, so Memorial Hall was originally designed in 1916. In June of 1922, Ordinance 2506 was passed, was provided for the funding for Memorial Hall to be constructed. Of course, a lot of events and activities happened there. In 1948, we did lease the facility for a short time to Brown Mackie College to use for their classes when their previous building had burned down. Other points of interest, in 1962, it was designated as a community fallout shelter. 1964, the building was declared obsolete due to the lack of events going on and the cost to operate the facility. So in 1962, we passed Ordinance 2778, which declared the building obsolete and to be used for community activities or for the Parks Department. Well, it wasn't the Parks Department at that time, but it was for the city to move in and use for recreation events. In 1970, Marymount College signed a lease with us to use it for their basketball. Also in 1970, we did a survey and evaluation of the building itself. In 1988, we did a feasibility study for reuse as a recreation center. And what was determined in that is that the foregoing factors would appear to weigh against adaptive reuse of Memorial Hall for recreation purposes, basically on the cost of bringing it up to standard and to purpose it as a rec center. Another thing of interest is that in 1979, to coincide with the opening of the Bicentennial Center, I guess it had already been opened, we declared Memorial Hall we were no longer going to rent the facility. I don't know if we did that, so we didn't want to compete against the Bicentennial Center, now Tony's Pizza Event Center, but that was Resolution 3436. And then in 2007, we passed another resolution which allowed it to be open at no charge for groups. And then again later in 2007, we came back and we set some fees to rent the facility. So as you can see, there's been I don't want to use the word hodgepodge, but I would say that we've just kind of, as we needed something to fill Memorial Hall or a group needed a space, that's kind of been the use of Memorial Hall. Now in the 80s, after it became more of a community facility, then we started a program, but that's when the gymnastics program moved in, arts and crafts moved over there, and we opened up, the band was still there, arts and crafts was there.
Gym facility.
The gym facility, and then in the early 90s is when Cats TV moved in there. 92 is the earliest record I can find on that. So as you can see, it's had a lot of different uses in its lifetime. One of the things that we've noticed since I've been here is the high use to run the building with little to no return on the facility. So as you are aware, we moved out gymnastics due to that agreement, and since we've worked an agreement with the Arts Center to move arts and crafts over to their facility. So right now, the only group still in the facility is the band. The Memorial Band still has a section of the facility.
Just recalling from when we took a tour of Memorial Hall several years ago, it didn't look like the band had that big of a space within Memorial Hall. Will we have an alternative to provide them, or is that something that we're even looking at this point?
I don't think we have an alternative for them at this point. You know, if this all went through and Hutton decided they felt like there was an appropriate space for them, you know, that certainly could be an option. The band certainly is aware that we're having this conversation, so they know we're at least talking about it. But I think there'll be plenty of time between now and when something actually happens for them to either find a location, or if we need to assist in that, we could certainly do that.
Thank you.
And currently, right now, the only active use of the facility is our building services division, Troy Reiner. They've been using the gym space as their workshop. It's the only place with high enough ceilings for them to construct things, build things. So they've temporarily taken over the space until we can find them a housing situation in the future as well.
Thank you.
So about 6 months ago, or maybe a little bit longer, Hutton reached out to us, and actually we had a meeting with Hutton and the Chamber of Commerce to kind of talk through some of the ideas that they had at the time. I don't think we thought it was the right timing with what was going on with Salina Media Connection to bring that forward. But now that things have moved on with Salina Media Connection, and the band is actually the only tenant left, we feel like this is the right time to get in front of you. Hutton's got a very preliminary, high-level plan. So the point today is for them to just kind of talk about what their view of the future is for Memorial Hall and see what the commission thinks about that. If that's something the commission's interested in moving forward with, then we'll draft some sort of a resolution of intent, or you know, just something that says that we are interested in moving forward in some way, and then we'll, you know, work with agreements and all those sort of things as the time goes on. So with that, I'll introduce Mike King, who is, I don't exactly know what his title is with Hutton, but he's the guy, he's the idea guy, I think, at Hutton. So go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Jacob. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. So this started in February of this year when the Chamber came to us and said, hey, we have this asset, this community asset, and they said we have a housing shortage, and would you take a look at that potentially for a housing opportunity? So we did. We toured it, came back, and had a couple of more meetings with the Chamber and then the city. And then in May, we presented to a joint group that included Chris, Mr. Wood, and the Chamber as well. And we said, what if an esports arena? Kind of memorializing a little bit about what the function of the original building was. We deemed it not appropriate for housing at that point. We ran some rough numbers on it, and it just didn't look like it was going to pencil out. So here we are today. We are not suggesting that the only use for this could be an esports arena, but we're suggesting this is something that we would like to discuss further with you and other opportunities that we feel could be useful for the building. Hutton is committed to Salina. We have an office here. I'll introduce a couple of the people that are going to be speaking here. We have Jennifer Zambecki, who leads our marketing and communications efforts for our 4 offices around the state. Josh Herman, next in line, and he leads our design team. And then Jason Gellig, who is the office leader manager for the Salina office. So we came back and we looked at, okay, what's important to the community, what's important to us, how can we help develop Salina? You know, we looked at it from an industrial point of view, from a healthcare point of view, from a housing point of view, and we just kept coming back to an arena, an event space, something that it was really designed to be. So through osmosis, and Josh will talk a little bit about, you know, possibly why the esports came to light, but we just appreciate what all the city has done and private developers have done to downtown the last decade or so, and we wanted to continue that energy as well. We have invested in downtown also. Our new space is on South 5th Street. If you haven't had an opportunity to stop by, I know Jason would love to show you around the old Royal Tire building. We reconverted it, and so that space is filling up quickly. So we're here today. Thank you for the opportunity to share some ideas. Please understand these are ideas. We'll continue to work on this, but we wanted to get some sort of letter of support or recommendation from you that you felt like we were moving in the correct direction as well. So with that, maybe Josh, if you'll come up and talk a little bit more.
Thanks, Mike. You guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I can hear it now. Okay, I'll go ahead and have you go to the next one. There we go. That's the big question of the day. So as an architect, one of the things that we get to do is dream with people. And, I see buildings all the time, and I see them differently a lot of times, because far too often you don't get that blank piece of paper and that blank piece of ground to just start from ground up. All too often we're converting historic buildings and old buildings into something new and trying to revitalize their use and make them still functional. Buildings were built quite differently back in the day than they are today, and this is a very robust building. And so, the idea of what if, what could it be? What are the possibilities? What are these endless things that we could narrow in on that would make sense for the building, the community, and even the region? And so, Mike said that this idea kind of came to us, and it's sort of through different avenues. One, we were in the pursuit of a new student union center for a college in the state, and as we toured other colleges, we learned more about the uprising of esports and how it's a scholarship activity and the popularity of it. And I have 3 teen boys, one of which in college and one of which getting ready to be in college. And so hearing that they might be able to qualify for esports scholarships was news to me. And so through all of this education process over the last 3 to 5 years, one of the things that when you ask what if, you don't want to feel like a fish swimming upstream. I mean, the building has got stadium seating. It's got an enormous stage. It's got a beautiful historic context and fabric that shouldn't be anything but what it was designed to do. And so you don't want to shove a medical practice into an old arena. You don't really, housing sounds great, and I know the shortage makes that seem like a big hurrah, but it just doesn't make sense. It's really hard to make apartments out of stadium seating. And so this idea of, trying to envision what another event venue would feel like in that building started to come to fruition, and we started talking about it and dreaming about it a little bit. And I kind of describe it like throwing a rock in a pond, ripples. And so, looking closely at the building details, the stone, the stage I already mentioned, the old seats, the setup, the lobby, the ticket booths, the amenities are there to support an esports activity. The next ripple out, thinking about the community, it's not meant to be a competitor to TPAC. I totally understand that and appreciate the way that that was just described to us. Wichita has 2 arenas, and they serve 2 totally different clientele and 2 totally different purposes. These would be even more vastly different, I think, than what Wichita has, for example. But I think that this could draw and attract something different. Plus, again, that historic venue is a great selling point. And then that next ripple out, just thinking about the state and all the colleges that we do have that could potentially play esports in an arena like this. To think about the state that the location of this facility being, airport, intersection of major highways, relatively in the middle, if you will. That's important. And then that fourth ripple out, again, regionally, it seems to me like there's a void to fill. There are these arenas that already exist in multiple cities around the country. The closest one, there's some smaller, I think there's other examples in Kansas City, but really you get down to, Denver and farther out, and Jennifer will speak to those details. And so just thinking about how this building naturally wants to be was really important to our what if pursuit. And you go and flip that. So we took a little bit of initiative and just said, well, what does what if look like? And, is this meant to be the final product? Absolutely not. If everyone said, yes, today, let's go forward and do this, is it going to turn out exactly like that picture? No. The essence of it, the idea of it, the general theme of it would be intact, and I think that it is totally doable. Really when you think of an esports arena, the top things that it needs, room to spare. Check, we've got that. Centralized location, check, we've got that. Technology, clearly supporting it with all of the right wires to the building would be a major upgrade. Player and spectator layout, check, it's got that. Inviting spaces away from the digital arena. That is something else that this building is equipped with, is ancillary spaces that could be used for the support, lounges and game rooms and retail cells and a food bar area, all of the things that it takes to make one of these arenas operate. Accessibility, that would be a big one that we would have to take a pretty hard look at. Obviously, a building built in 1916 is going to need some code and ADA upgrades to make it a community facility. And then security. Those are all of the key components that really go into one of these types of facilities. And so, again, trying to modernize and bring it up to speed, make it congruent with today's codes and ADA, and still preserve the rich history, I think is what this rendering does a really good job capturing. On the outside, you can tell it's really just some signage and maybe the artistic rendering of some lights. And I think you could be there. You know, it really stands for itself. It speaks to itself. Again, swimming the same direction as it was originally designed to be is already there. So we're not having to redefine all of that. On the inside, you know, again, it's same thing. There's going to be some cleanup needed, of course. You can go ahead and flip to the next one, I think. There you go. But, you know, even the gymnastics area, there's like a level stage built on the right-hand side, or I think that's the east side. That, you know, would make a great place for some little collegiate landing stations. I think there's some natural things that the building lends itself to be able to turn itself into an esports arena in the future. Clearly, when you ask what if, it could be 1,000 things, and this is just one. So the next part of the process is really vetting out, well, what does the market want to support? What is the developmental impact to the community and to the region? What are the real possibilities of seeing tons and tons of teens and ages of all kinds coming to spectate, and collegiate athletes, scholarship athletes coming to compete in Salina regionally? What does the event calendar look like? That's almost more important than whatever architectural element we put into the building. Those are the types of things that we would find ourselves kind of at that next part of the journey uncovering. So to talk about esports arena details a little bit more, I think Jennifer's up next.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you all for having us. We appreciate it. So I get excited thinking about this because I grew up in Kansas, and I've worked all over the state, and Salina's always had kind of a special place in my heart because I think it's a place that we, as a state, is so valuable and so ready to keep growing, to keep being more important on the state and regional stage. And I think this is a really cool opportunity to recognize or realize some of that potential because of what esports is and who it speaks to and who it attracts. So can you go to the next slide? Thanks, Scott. So we know that this is really geared toward a younger demographic and their families, but I think that there's also something to be said for just kind of the cool factor, especially when in a state like Kansas and a region like the Midwest, and maybe even in a community like Salina, sports has been so defined for so long by what people do on fields and on courts and that sort of thing. And this is such a great opportunity for a whole different segment of our youth, our high school and college performers and athletes to have, you know, their spotlight and their kind of day in the sun. So that gets me excited. Maybe it's because I was a kid who never played sports. So I think it would be great for Salina to be the first to this kind of region for this type of space. What I think we all know, and you can go to the next slide, is that this is a kind of a juggernaut right now in high schools and colleges, and will keep moving down into younger athletes, and will probably keep attracting older athletes, and that there is a lot of energy around this in the region. In fact, I saw the KC Game On is on the Zoom today. That's, you know, a great organization serving the Kansas City market, and we know that there's a lot of energy for this in Denver and St. Louis and Texas, and that the more we make spaces like this available, the bigger and better this is going to get. The momentum was there, like so many things, before COVID, and while the momentum halted, like so many things, because of the pandemic, I think there's a lot of evidence to show that there's a market waiting to rear back up into this live event space. You can go to the last slide. Thank you. So just a couple of statistics for your consideration. This is more for you to take away, and we encourage you to do your own research. But this is a fast-growing industry, a fast-growing market with a lot of attention that is, I think, under-recognized at this point, maybe because there have been a few other things going on in the last couple of years while this has been catching fire with the people it serves the most. But I think this is a really great opportunity for Salina, and we appreciate the opportunity to be considered for it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, go back. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of things that this could be in addition to esports. We've reached out to the Acacia and talked with them a little bit. They do have some interest in this. Salina has historically been a place to hold statewide events and state championships. So that's not out of the realm of possibilities. The military, as far as recruitment goes, if we start to think about what this building's going to have, it's going to have a lot of technology to it. It's going to have a lot of speed and a lot of bandwidth. So you start looking at what are some ancillary businesses or opportunities there. I just found out that the military has esports teams. So how cool would it be for the first event here to be a military event in Memorial Hall? To me, that excites me. Some of the other things, Comic-Con, roller skating. I mean, our intent would be to have the floor remain the way it is and have portable chairs in there so you could use it for other opportunities. Josh would have to flush out all of those opportunities as well. Vintage technology / games. We see there's some businesses that could be kind of under the bleachers on both the east and the west side, some startup tech type companies. We want people that enjoy gaming to be able to buy their supplies there, to help with our tax base, to help with our tourism as well. So again, one of our biggest thoughts was to reach somebody who hasn't already been reached, and I really am glad the way Jennifer highlighted that, those that aren't participating on fields or courts at this present time. So Jason will come up and talk just a little bit about Hutton, and then we'll be more than glad to stand for questions.
Thank you.
So why Hutton? I mean, hopefully this endeavor, the end result is that we would join with you and you would entrust with us a resource that we would seek to complete this vision for. And so just to let you know a little bit about Hutton, if you don't already know. So Hutton Construction was founded in 1992 by Mark Hutton in Wichita, Kansas. And over the last 30 years, Hutton Construction has become Hutton Corporation. And we are a 275 to 300 person design, build, and construction management firm. We have offices in Wichita, McPherson, Garden City, and as of about 2.5 years ago, we have offices here in Salina. So in the end of 2018, we opened our office here in Salina through the acquisition of Busboom and Rao Construction Company, who is a construction company who had a long history here in the Salina community, dating back to the 1920s. And since 2019, we've completed dozens of projects here in the city of Salina, including the Homewood Suites Hotel, work on the historic MBA bank building on the corner of Iron and Santa Fe, Sunflower Bank, the Schwann's Company, Salina Regional Health Center, and many others. Now and very recently, we've finished up work on KU's School of Nursing project here on Santa Fe. We're currently remodeling the Salina Journal building for the Salina Regional Health Center. We're just finishing up the new bus facility for OCCK, working at Salina Airport Authority, and just started here fairly recently renovations for the new Salina Urology Clinic and hospital on Santa Fe as well. So we're very excited and very grateful to be a part of the Salina community. When I think of, why Hutton, why would we be a good partner, a good fit, a good person to align with to see this project through, I really only have to think to our purpose. And our purpose is that together we will build life into our employees' dreams, our clients' visions, and our community's future. And we do that through our guiding principles, which is to lead, inspire, respect, and construct. And with that purpose and with those guiding principles, we're energized by the opportunity to find projects that align with that purpose. And we really feel like this is the type of project that helps us align with the purpose, with the things that really get down to the basis of why we really exist as a company. It speaks to our employees, to our communities, and our clients. And so for that reason, we really feel like this is an exciting project, something that we would really love to be a part of, and that we hope would make us a great partner for the city on this particular project.
So thank you. Our request would be a resolution of support of some kind, working with Mr. Woods and his staff on that. So we'd stand for questions at this time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate the presentation. Questions from the commission?
Whichever generation that was Z, I'm sure I'm like 4 or 5 letters after that one, but I must admit, even though I haven't knowingly paid for my kids to go to any of these events, if I was a 70-year-old guy with a Thursday morning free, would there be anything in this building that I could just go down, say at 11 o'clock in the morning and use, or is it more a spectator venue, or, I mean, for me to come watch the professionals, or?
I think part of our vision is that while this would chiefly be marketed and architected, which is my new favorite verb. It's not a verb, but I've decided it needs to be one because you say constructed, so why not say architected? That it's architected for an esports tournament setting, that the space would of course be available for other types of events or activities, and potentially open to the public on a reservation basis, potentially even depending on the management structure and the operation for certain types of community activities for very little or free. So I think we're seeing this as a potential community space in all the times that it's not being used for sports tournaments, but there are also these types of events or activities that are somewhere between practicing esports and a big tournament for esports that are still esports related, where the space could be used perhaps by area colleges or high schools.
I guess I should put my ignorance way out on the street here. So for a tournament, do the competitors have, and I'm guessing they have screens, but are their screens projected up on a big screen so everybody can watch them compete?
Yes, that's part of the, do you want to go back to the?
Yeah, actually, if you go back a couple
The
slides.
interior slide, the interior design.
Actually, if you would, I'm sorry, you go forward a couple, one more, right there. This might actually be the best screen to give you an idea. This is actually an existing esports arena. And so what's pictured in this black and white image on the top half of the screen, you can obviously see the audience sitting out here in front and then looking towards the stage. And on the stage, what you're actually seeing there is 2 teams competing against each other, 2 or 4. It looks like there's only 2 teams seated right now. And so those 2 groups of 5 people on the left and on the right are actually playing a video game against each other. And on the big screens that you see back behind the players that are elevated up there on the top left, that is essentially the viewing screens of what is showing up on their computers so that people in the audience can watch them play. So that is actually the attraction. So it's
I'm just curious, how much do people pay to come in to watch?
That's a fantastic question. So I've only been to one of these events personally, and I think it was $50.
Well,
Is that fair? 20 or 40 or $50 or something like
For the day.
that? Well, and it was actually for a weekend.
Yeah.
So it was a multi-day event, yeah. And so it's I think the pricing structure probably depends on how big of a draw it was. This was actually at WSU, the one that Mike and I went to. But I know they also, yeah, not that one. But they also have membership programs where they'll sell memberships to use the facilities, kind of like you would a gymnasium. So you could actually come here, and I mean, there's a lot of different ways to operate one of these. The short answer to your original question was trying to make the building flexible during the times where events aren't here would definitely be something that we need to look at.
Other questions?
I'm a little bit like Commissioner Davis. I'm a Pac-Man Pong guy. That tells you how old I am. So, are there? Well, may have to go buy me one and practice. So, I know I don't know much about this, but I do have a couple individuals I know that actually went down to nationals. I believe it was last year, or year before that in Atlanta. I guess there's a individual from Salina that's been fairly successful at this, and I guess there's actually money to be made at some point. So there's a lot more that us, whatever generation we are, needs to find out. But in talking to them, there were some kind of neat things. I don't know if you've heard about the e-gyms, but there's an e-gym type of deal that a guy has developed, and it not only helps people with playing these type of sports, but it also helps them on communicating. They're able to sell. So I'd be glad to set you up with those people to talk about. I just think there is, again, it's kind of like everybody needs to find what they, something they're good at or something they enjoy doing. And to me, it was, being on the sports field. To this, it's somebody being at a screen and doing this. So it is becoming fairly large, and I don't know how that fits in with everything, but I think it's an interesting concept for a space. And I know where you're coming at on the housing. I've looked at the temple for housing too, and there's just a lot of open space there. When you're trying to do something with that, it's just not viable. So thank you.
One of the things that we learned in research was Cox, the big Cox Communication, based in Atlanta, and they are owners of the Atlanta Reign, an esports pro team. This is a pro event. When Josh and I were at Wichita State at that tournament, we were talking with the coaches and the students. They go through calisthenics, they go through conditioning, not much like football players or basketball players, but that's an important part of the discipline, and they were all scholarship athletes there, and the coach was paid as well.
Okay, I've got a few questions as well, and I don't know which one of you to direct these to, but as you're, making this proposal, what is exactly the proposed relationship? Is this a facility that we would turn over to you for you to renovate and manage? Is this something, who would own it? Is it a cooperative venture between the city via Parks and Rec? How exactly do you envision that being structured?
We see two ways. We see the Parks and Rec or the city being involved, or you just sell the facility to a private group that we would bring together with you. We have talked to a couple of local investors to gauge their interest in that. They have a very high interest in this. But we would see probably first case scenario is the city getting out of it totally. And then we would give you some metrics and some conditions to meet along the way. Some, for the coming years.
Okay, what types of metrics are we talking? Are funding or?
So it could be funding. It could be that we agree to, after we have determined what we could use this space for, that we would put that level of dollar of investment into the facilities, that it would be open for certain hours of certain weeks, that would be made available to community colleges, to high schools. That's kind of what we're envisioning. We can also see, we see a retail side to this as well. So there can be some sales tax dollars associated with that as well.
Okay. So at this point, you really don't have like a figure in mind that you're looking to the city commission?
Correct.
For.
Correct. We don't have a dollar amount in mind. What we wanted to do is, in this study session, is to paint a picture for you of something to see. then we would like a commitment from you as if we continue to now put substantial amount of dollars and time into this, that this is something that we would have first options at being able to secure.
Gotcha. And also seeing that we have, I believe, a representative from the Salina Public Library in the audience, and since by virtue of my position, I also serve on the Public Library Board, I guess my question would be, would you see these facilities somehow in competition with the library's tech center? They're possibly looking at expanding some services into video and audio recording. I mean, I guess my question is, I love the idea of the esports arena, but hopefully we're all working, together to make the most of the assets we have, and we're not duplicating services. So I didn't know if you had, any plans in terms of, either teaching technology, providing those types of spaces, things like that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So we're actually working with the library on that study
Okay.
now. And obviously, we would hope that we wouldn't be designing something that would be destroying each other.
Right, complementary as
Hopefully, we
opposed
would
to
make those
competing. Right,
compatible for
right,
sure.
right.
And I would hope that, there would be some overlap. I mean,
Okay.
if there are some things in this facility that you don't have to invest into the library facility itself, great, let's figure out a relationship there, a collaboration where these things could be kind of shared. But I don't think there's enough overlap in what we're describing for this facility that would compete with what's been talked about with the library.
Okay, and it's good to know that you have open lines of communication with the library, so,
Yeah.
It'll be an ongoing discussion then.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. Sure.
You'd asked about operation in your
Yeah.
question, and so we also want to be on the record saying that while we have this vision and we have this excitement around the idea, we also have much to learn about the operation of something like this, and we know we're not the experts. So we would look to existing esports experts and people who have experience in that space to help us know the best course of action there. And while this is an emerging space, there are some already existing models in other communities of operators existing in otherwise occupied spaces that are, kind of operating that esports event or tournament. And so we would just look for whatever is the best fit for this community and for kind of what we have in the region, and what's available from an already existing operator standpoint who would be, basically available and want to come in and help operate this facility.
Jennifer, what are some of the, like the closest esports arenas that, like, when we leave here, if we wanted to take a look and see what those look like? I mean, I think you'd referenced Kansas City and Denver, Wichita. I mean, what are the other?
Well, it's my understanding that there is a little bit of a distinction between something that was designed to be an esports arena and
Right.
something that is
That's
being used
adapted,
for
right.
esports tournaments.
Right.
So I think both are worth looking at because I think we have, our space is probably, looking to be something more of a hybrid. This is a huge situation over here on the screen right now. So that's not that we wouldn't want to dream big and have a big space for that, but we would want to make it right for Memorial Hall, and that might not be quite right. So anyway, so I think we would want to do that exploration with you and find out more about what we can learn from the arenas that have already started to exist in and of themselves versus those that are operating out of existing spaces and see what makes sense for the space.
I have a similar or somewhat related question. This is actually a fairly large indoor space in town. Would that main floor space be adaptable enough that different types of spectator events could occur? Because you already have the stadium seating. And can those tables on that ground floor be moved? And I believe Mr. Cotton mentioned
Yes,
skating. And
I think the idea to keep the main floor flexible and not attach fixed or permanent seating to that would ideally be the goal. And right now, there's a bunch of construction on the stage or the old stage area. Obviously, that would all come out, and we'd reinstate the stage as it normally was. So, yeah, if there are other events or other activities that could go on there, I think that would absolutely be a possibility.
Any other questions from the commission? Well, Jennifer and Josh and Jason and Mike, thank you very much for your presentation today. Since we do have some time, before we come back together and talk about, whether or not there's a consensus to proceed with some kind of resolution of support, are there any members of the public that would like to speak in regard to this item?
I'm Lene Meyer from Salina. It just dawned on me, and I wasn't planning on being here for this, but I walked in a few minutes late, so I don't know the whole big picture. But if this is games, things to sit down and do on computer or whatever, my big concern is the kids now in our world have so much time doing this, and we're reading more and more how corruptive some of that can be. How can we advocate, if they're doing all of this, for them to be outside running and playing and getting sunshine and getting healthy rather than getting hooked? I think that's something you really, really, really need to think about before you support something like this. It's not all about money, it's not all about business. Ultimately, it's about our health and our community wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Mayor, Commissioners, Eric Brown, President of the Chamber. As they alluded to in their presentation, it was one of the most bitterly cold February days that I can remember. When we went and looked at Memorial Hall for the housing, obviously the bowl, you can't necessarily fill that bowl to be able to put housing in there. And then from there, this is part of what their visioning is. So when you talk about a community as we're trying to grow, as we're trying to differentiate ourselves, this is another one that helps us differentiate ourselves from other communities in Kansas and other communities across the region. So I do have two kids, 13 and 10, so when they show folks up there watching tournaments, I can vouch for that. Although I haven't taken them to tournaments, I can tell you the amount of time they spend on YouTube watching other kids play games and watching other kids unbox things. It's staggering to me. So I do appreciate her comments about the health of the children too, but this is a way, again, as we think about this, we have other structures in this community that continue to sit dormant right now. This structure at some point probably will be dormant, and it's a way to, the ground up construction is very expensive. This is a way to continue to keep an asset in the community long-term and revitalize it and help get folks to the core that way. The other thing from the Visit Salina side, we've had really good success with community assets, and much thanks to the city over the years for the softball, the baseball, tennis. I mean, you just talk about all these different sports that bring the visitors to our community. And this would be an asset that would give Visit Salina the ability to go out and find sanctioned tournaments, whether it's console gaming, whether it's PlayStation. It just depends on what's out there, PC gaming. Those kind of tournaments exist from a state, from a regional, from a national level, and we'd be willing to support helping them if they went down that road. So thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Eric.
Mayor Hodges, we do have one online.
Okay. All right, Mr. McDowell, go ahead, and then we'll take the person online.
How much is it going to, because I've been listening online too, but how much is it going to cost the city, since they're already tied in with the baseball, or not the baseball, the tennis courts, like almost $1 million?
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. That was one of our questions, and I think the answer to that at this point is it's to be determined. So we don't have a figure for that. All right. And we have Mr. Engstrom. Can we go ahead and unmute him?
Hello. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys for allowing me to jump on here real quick and talk. So yes, I am from Kansas City. I do run Kansas City or KC Game On. We are an organization that has been doing esports events for many different years here in the Kansas City Metro. We do not actually own our own space, so I want to make sure you guys were that up front. We actually do renting spaces, so kind of similar to what you guys are talking about building. And this picture behind me here, you can see that we basically built out our event for people to come in and play games. So this was a full-on gaming convention that happened in late 2019, right before pandemic took over, and hope to get back on our feet after this started. A couple of other items that I wanted to throw out there is, yes, you guys will need to manage this in some way, like you do Bicentennial Center. You're going to have full-time staff to be doing marketing and trying to find things to come in. They're not just going to gravitate you to the event space itself. You need to do the work to get them there, right? And then the last thing is I also wanted to show, and I've got a screenshot that I'd like to show you guys, is that esports in general just isn't 5 people playing video games. It's way more in depth than that. There's thousands of different jobs and opportunities that come out of esports, including production, play-by-plays, education level. There's so many different things that you can actually grow into the esports realm that will allow all of your citizens to have opportunities to grow professionally in that space, and not just go toward esports, but rather, you know, another marketable job, whether it's media or, you know, writing or editing or anything of that nature. So there's tons of different variants that are spawning out of esports itself in that general direction. So I just want to throw my 2 cents in there, and obviously I'm available if you ever want to hit me up for advice or talk about something. Feel free. I'm online, nick@kcgameon.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Engstrom, and don't be surprised if you're hearing from either the city or from Hutton if they haven't gotten in touch with you already. Thank you very much for calling in this afternoon. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to make comments? And if not, I'll go ahead and look to my fellow commissioners to see if we have a consensus about moving forward with a resolution of support.
Well, Mayor, I'll be honest and say, I too don't know too much about this, but I'm enthralled with the concept, and although we're at kind of a rough stage right now, given Hutton's reputation and for the work they do and the project management, and also the excitement I think I feel because it can attract a younger audience to Salina, and we're always looking for that, as well as retaining who we have. I'd say that we should move forward with conversations at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, some things just feel right. They're exciting. And this would definitely, I think, stand us apart. You know, every place has tennis courts and basketball arenas and football fields, but this would be something special. I'd like to see that tank out front lit up, and you could put some special animation on the tank.
That's the condition. You've got to adapt.
Because I don't think folks in town will let you move that tank. But so you have to figure out what you can do with the tank. And I do share Ms. Meyer's concern, but I think our older generation, and I can now say our older generation rather than that older generation, we're going to have to accept to some degree that this is part of society, and we're going to have to engage our kids to do the electric stuff, but also the physical stuff. It doesn't, I think we've been so caught up on either or that we forgot that there is a compromise, which is, okay, you want to come in here and play, and this is just an example, you know, give me 4 laps, you know, or go down to the sub-basement, pump some iron for a while, then come back up and sit. But I think we can incorporate both, because I think the ship that's carrying the kids this way, not just kids, a lot of adults in here probably don't want to admit it. I see a few shaking their heads. You know, that ship has sailed, and we can either ride with it and benefit from it, or forever be scorned by our youth. But I don't think it's a totally lost cause.
Commissioner Hoppeck.
Yeah, I think it's worth pursuing.
Okay, well, it sounds like the consensus is to go ahead and offer a resolution of support at some level. And I appreciate all the work that you all have put in on this to this point. I'll just let you, I'm cautiously optimistic. As you know, city resources are stretched to their breaking point, and we have, I won't even go into all the things that our strategic planning has let us know is important to us as an organization and to Salina as a city. But it sounds like we can at least, keep exploring this and see where it leads, and let's move forward with that resolution of support.
And, one thing Mr. Engstrom mentioned that I really like, the potential offshoots from this as far as education, training, other relatable skills that people can develop out of this, I think maybe a hidden benefit. You won't realize it right up front, but 2 or 3 years from now, universities may have classes there.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. And we will resume the meeting, our regular meeting at 4 o'clock. All right. Yes, yes, he is. All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Monday, October 11th Salina City Commission meeting. I'd first like to confirm with staff that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been properly provided.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll proceed with roll call.
Mayor Hodges,
Here.
Commissioner Davis,
Here?
Commissioner Hoppick,
Here.
Commissioner Peck, Commissioner Ryan.
Here.
Yes, as you may have noticed, Commissioner Peck will not be joining us for the meeting today, which brings us to the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence. Just want to note that we did pass a very sad milestone last week. We lost our 150th and 151st citizen to COVID, so please keep those folks and their families in your thoughts and prayers. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, awards and proclamations.
Item 3.1, recognition of the week of October 17th through the 23rd, 2021, as Friends of the Salina Public Library Week in the city of Salina. Greta Contis will read the proclamation.
Thank you. Several of you have heard me before, right? I know what a fan I am of the library here. I've been a long-time member of the Board of Friends. Whereas Friends of the Salina Public Library raise money that enables our library to move from good to great, providing the resources for additional programming, much-needed equipment, support for children and adult summer reading programs, scholarships for teen volunteers, and special events throughout the year. Whereas the work of the Friends of the Salina Public Library highlights the fact that our library is the cornerstone of the community, providing opportunities for all to engage in the joy of lifelong learning and connect with the thoughts and ideas of others from ages past to present. Whereas the Friends of the Salina Public Library understand the critical importance of well-funded libraries and advocates to ensure that our library gets the resources it needs to provide a wide variety of services to all ages, including access to print and electronic materials, along with expert assistance in research, readers advisory, and children's services. Whereas the Friends of the Salina Public Library's gift of their time and commitment to the library set an example for all in how volunteerism leads to positive civic engagement and the betterment of our community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Melissa Hodges, Mayor, proclaims the week of October 17th to the 23rd, 2021 as Friends of the Salina Public Library Week in Salina, Kansas, and urges everyone to join the Friends of the Salina Public Library and thank them for all they do to make our library and community so much better.
Thank you so much, and
Thank you.
thanks. I believe I saw library staff here
You
earlier.
did.
They're-
You saw the Assistant Director, Miss Amy Adams.
Ms. Adams?
And- yes.
Thank you, yes, thank you so much for being here today and for all the work you do on behalf of the library. We've got a real jewel here in our community, and we're very, very fortunate
We do.
to have it.
And we're fortunate to have the staff that we have.
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
Are there any special events going on this
Oh.
week that we should know about?
Well, now that you mention it, all this week we will have a membership drive, okay? And if you join this week, and it's only $10 for an individual, $25 for family, okay? And that's good through 2022. Now, there are hundreds of programs that the library offers, as you well know. And many of them are, you guys are talking about, moving to all this virtual, electronic, and gaming stuff. The library actually moved to that at the first of COVID. And so a lot of their programs were make and take. One I'm especially fond of that I have to brag about. We know that reading for little kids is so essential to their success in school. So they started then, and we help fund it, but we don't entirely fund it, but help fund it. They call it Take and Make. And the kid gets, every kid, there's no cost to the child if a parent has a library card or the kid does. They get a little bag, and in that bag are the ingredients to make something. In this case, the first one was a snack. The book telling them about a kid making this snack, and that the mother and the child can read together, and then there's information in that bag that tells the parent how important it is to teach the kid to read and to work with the child to read.
How
That's just
wonderful.
one example of the hundreds of programs they have.
That's absolutely wonderful.
Isn't
Well,
that-
thank you.
isn't that
Yes,
neat?
thank you so much for sharing that.
Any questions for me about the Friends?
Any questions? I don't think so. We just know that we're very supportive of the work that you do and of the public library. And if you'd like to come forward and
I
get your signed
will, I will.
proclamation.
And next weekend will be, or the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, our big semi-annual book sale. Hundreds of mysteries and hundreds of westerns and general fiction novels.
That's fantastic. A wonderful opportunity.
I'm going to sneak through this way if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine.
I personally think you'd be a horrible poker player. You have a hard time showing your excitement.
And I would love to play Texas Hold'em, but I can't. You're right. If I can get any good cards, it shows. But I am all excited about the kids' programs. You can't help but
Oh.
go downstairs and see those little kids.
It's a great place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your advocacy and your enthusiasm.
Thank you.
All right. This brings us to Citizens Forum, and if my fellow commissioners will indulge me for a moment, I would like to provide you all with a couple of reminders and comments before we begin our regular commission meeting. First of all, the members of the City Commission are your elected representatives. As your elected representatives, we not only listen to citizen comments during meetings, but we also receive phone calls and emails individually and collectively, and hear from citizens during our everyday lives at the grocery store, at work, at church. I can assure you that each member of this commission takes all that input into consideration, along with staff reports and oftentimes personal research, before making decisions that we were elected to make. Decisions that we hope will be in Salina's immediate and long-term best interests. Sometimes commissioners don't agree with each other. Sometimes you'll disagree with our decisions. But just because you don't agree with our decisions doesn't mean that your comments weren't carefully considered. Your comments at the City Commission meeting are one element in the decision-making process. While citizen participation is the cornerstone of democracy, there are rules for that participation. The City Commission is here to conduct the people's business fairly and efficiently, and that requires establishing rules of participation. So I'm sorry to have to review this, but we're going to. As the presiding officer of this meeting, my job is to run the meeting according to these rules and to ensure that these rules apply equally to everyone. These rules can be found on the back part of today's agenda, if you'd like to reference them. And I would urge you, if you don't take a look at them today, take a look at them when you do have a moment to do so. But we will briefly recap the highlights of that policy and establish when and how to offer your comments. The first way for citizens to comment is at Citizens Forum, which is coming up next on our agenda. Citizens Forum is an opportunity for the public to speak on an item that does not appear on today's agenda. Citizens are asked to identify themselves by their first and last name for the record and state the city that they are from. Remarks are limited to 3 minutes. Individual commissioners may or may not respond to questions if they choose, but their responses will count toward your total time allotment. If a person speaks about an item that appears on today's order of business or exceeds their time, I'll ask them to stop. And if they disregard that request, I'll ask them to leave the meeting room. In the unlikely event that a person disregards the rules, as the presiding officer at this meeting, I'll ask one of our law enforcement officers to escort you from the room so that our business can resume. As the commission works our way through the agenda, each item under consideration follows the same order. First, the staff report will be presented. Second, if there is an applicant, they will have the opportunity to comment if they choose. Third, the commissioners will ask questions of staff and/or the applicant. Fourth, public comment will be received within the previously mentioned guidelines, first and last name, city of residence, limiting remarks to 3 minutes. Once all individuals have had a chance to speak, public comment on that particular item is closed. Fifth and finally, the item is returned to the governing body for further discussion, comments, and action. On occasion, a member of the public, generally what I'd call a subject matter expert, may be asked to return to the podium by a commissioner to answer specific questions, but that instance does not reopen public comments. A reminder that some forms of communication are not allowed in the meeting room. And mainly that's generally disruptive behavior. Talking, making noises, gesturing while a speaker recognized, be it a staff member, a member of the public, or a commissioner, is speaking, or displaying items like signs or banners. Any person who chooses to disregard these rules will first be asked to stop. If that request is disregarded, they will be asked to leave the meeting room. In the unlikely event that a person refuses to comply, again, as the presiding officer of this meeting, I'll ask our law enforcement officers to escort you from the room so that our business can resume. Now that we've reviewed public participation rules and established our expectations and the consequences, I do look forward to hearing from each and every one of you that wants to speak today, but also to conducting a meeting that makes the best use of all of our time. So thank you very much for bearing with me through that. We had kind of a rocky meeting last meeting, and I know that we can all do better. So with that, I will open up Citizens Forum for anyone who would like to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda.
Deborah Corrales, Salina. Today I just want to discuss how the media attacks and misinforms the public on dog attacks. In March of 2015, the Salina Journal reported that a woman was walking her dogs at Lakewood when a rogue pit bull attacked her dogs. When she intervened, she too was injured. A man ran up, grabbed the pit bull, threw it in a car, and left. She was posting all over Facebook, hoping to locate the dog and the owner. She said she didn't know what the dog was, but gave a description of the dog, the owner, and the vehicle. So how did the Salina Journal come to the conclusion that the dog was a pit bull? The dog and the owner were never located, so the dog wasn't visually identified by an alleged expert. The breeds of the victims' dogs weren't mentioned, but pit bull was mentioned 5 times. The breed of the dog that attacked shouldn't have even been mentioned, as it clearly was not known. Articles like this are the reason books like The Misunderstood Nanny Dogs and dogbites.org are unreliable sources of information, because media articles like this are their main source of information. National animal organizations discount them for factual information. Non-fact-based news coverage is what gives these type of dogs a bad rap. Now, I gave you a picture. The dog on the right is my pit bull. The 2 dogs on the left are puppies that were done in this genetic study. They are half purebred Basenji and half Cocker Spaniel. And if you don't see how my pit bull looks like those dogs, you'd be blind. My dog, I didn't have her 2 months. I got her in Texas. She learned 8 hand commands, I mean hand commands, in 2 months. I came to Salina, I called the animal shelter, I told them I had her, I told them I knew I couldn't keep her, that I just wanted to rehome her, and a week later, after the person they made contact with me, told me to contact them, didn't show up, they ripped her from my arms. BSL doesn't just hurt dogs, it hurts people.
Thank you, Ms. Corrales. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak?
Nancy Hodges, Salina, Kansas. I will try not to embarrass the mayor. And I did want to thank the city staff and the commission. I am electronically challenged, but I do watch commission meetings on television. And I found myself at age 88 swearing at the television last week. I really appreciate the remarks about the decorum, because I think it's important for the meeting to proceed, but I also think it's important for citizens to realize that there's a time and a place to behave. So thank you for going over those rules, Mayor, and thank you all for your service. And I have found the city staff to be very helpful and considerate when I call with my complaints. But I did want to thank you for restating the rules. And I do think it's very difficult for the person who's leading the meeting to time and do all that. I probably would have another person do that. But the fact that you're doing it is very important. And let's look forward to a lot better meetings than last week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Blanchard. I live in Salina. I'm going to go a little bit out of order here because I have 3 different things I'd like to address. First of all, the study session, I want to address the study session from last week. That was a really good, informative study session. I think one of the things it showed us is that we've been doing the wrong thing for a long time, and we're way behind on getting more density, smaller housing footprints, and really dealing with affordability. The second sub-related item was comments that Vice Mayor Davis made in other business regarding the apartment complex out by Menards. I think that the Vice Mayor's comments were 100% on target. The placing apartments on that parcel is perhaps the least, I should just go the other way. It's probably the worst planning decision this city's probably ever going to make. I'm hoping it doesn't go through because there are a lot of problems, and one of them that has not even been addressed yet are the perimeter roads and a traffic analysis. But Dr. Davis's comments about being next to the interstate were met with a comment from the city manager that there are other homes in that same area that are adjacent to the interstate. Well, the Vice Mayor's comments were about it's not a very desirable location, and he's 100% correct. If you look at the housing that's there now, first of all, that housing was there before the interstate highway was placed there. There was US 81 highway at one time went by there. And the second thing is that I'm not sure how desirable those properties are. They're mobile homes, and we don't even allow mobile homes really in the community anymore. So it's not like we're building new properties that are apples and apples. So thank you, Trent, for saying that. I also like to say thank you for your comments that you made about the decorum of the meeting. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said a well-informed electorate is a prerequisite to democracy. And I think sometimes we lose sight that the key words there are an informed electorate. Now, nobody's probably harder on a consistent basis on this commission than me. But I will say this, I think that the way you all were treated at that last meeting was embarrassing. I was embarrassed as a resident to have to watch that, so I appreciate that you are doing it. And then just one last thing on an informed electorate. I just want to let everyone know that tomorrow evening at 7:30, there will be the NAACP, North Salina Community Development, and Centennial Park will be holding a City Commission Candidates Forum. And I think we have commitments from most of the people, including Commissioner Hoppick to be there. And so thank you guys all for that, and we look forward to seeing everyone there tomorrow night at 7:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Dalton McDowell, City of Salina. Since we're losing half the commission will be new or running, I think as close as it is to the election, I think you guys should table anything that's gonna cost the city a crap ton of money. Because you guys have a tendency of wasting a bunch of money.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak at public comment?
David Norland, Salina. I just wanted to follow up on the library, Friends of the Library public announcement. And I'm hoping that there will be some people who tune this in and watch the meeting as Ms. Hodges does from outside. I actually don't know if there's a reporter here. That would be nice, wouldn't it, if every day there were 2 or 3. But one thing that I think may have escaped public notice, and I'm speaking, I think, on behalf of the group in Salina called One Salina, which advocates for understanding of immigrants and immigrant issues. We are all immigrants. And one of the things at our last meeting that we talked about and that the library presented to us was the fact that now Rosetta Stone language learning is available to citizens from the comfort of their room, of their home and computer. And I know that there are many who do not necessarily, but even with a mobile phone, you can utilize it. It is a free service by the public library. I think it's a great illustration of how the kind of understanding that Mr. Blanchard was talking about is achievable when we are beginning to speak the same language. And I think that metaphor applies in many ways, whether it's about information or about speaking with the assumptions of the language. I would love to learn Spanish. I think I'm way underqualified for that. Don't know if my learning curve is advancing with my age, but I think it's open to everybody, regardless of age. So thank you to the library and to the commission for honoring the Friends of the Public Library today.
Thank you, Mr. Neuland. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at Citizens Forum today? And I don't see anyone with their virtual hand raised, so we will proceed to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing for dangerous structure at 133 South Penn.
All right, Mr. Pilcher.
Get all my stuff out here. All right. I'm Sean Pilcher, building official with the city. Here to have a public hearing for 133 South Penn Avenue. First part of my little slideshow here is just going to go a little bit over the statute and the process of it, and then we'll get into the actual public hearing portion of it. Start off with the required process is from state statutes 12-1750. I'll summarize the steps really quick here. I'm not going to read through every single one of these, but pass a resolution to conduct a public hearing. We did that on October 23rd, setting the date for today with resolution 217980. Publish resolution 2 times, at least 30 days prior to the public hearing. That was done on the 27th of August and the September 3rd. Copy of the resolution must be mailed to the interested parties. That was completed on October 25th. And then, of course, conduct the public hearing. That's what we're going to do today. At the conclusion of the hearing, the commission will determine if the structure is unsafe or dangerous. If dangerous, the commission will pass a resolution. The one that's on the table today is 21-7990. Resolution shall establish a time for the property owner to commence and complete repairs or demolition of the structure, and also state that if the owner does fail to complete by that timeline, the city is obligated to either cause repairs or raise the structure. Resolution shall be published in the city's official newspaper and mailed to the owners and the identified parties of interest. The cost to the city, if the city is to perform the demolition, state law provides a process to do that. The city may sell salvage to make up costs, but what we'll do is they'll bill the property owner, and if the property owner does not make payment within 30 days, the city will assess that to the property. Costs incurred to date have been securing the property, investigation, research, site inspection, title report, document preparation, publication, certified mailings, and legal counsel. Okay, now we're at the public hearing part, so I don't know if you have to officially open.
I don't know either, but let's err on the side of caution and declare the public hearing is now open.
All right. To ensure with procedural fairness, the building official's evidence is not given to the commission prior to the meeting. I believe you guys got that in your packet today. So anyway, with that said, it's my recommendation that the address at 133 South Penn be deemed dangerous. Legal description is in the Oakdale edition. Building description, it's a single-family dwelling. It also has 3 storage sheds, 8x8, 8x8, and 8x18. The status is vacant. Was behind on taxes, and we'll get to that a little bit in depth a little bit later. The property taxes owed 2016 through 2020 totaled $5,466, and their property is, it was under a tax sale that actually occurred. The identified parties were listed here. This is where all the mailings went to after we set the public hearing date. The contents of that mailing are listed below. Had a cover letter, dangerous structures inspection checklist that we used to determine that we thought it was dangerous, and resolution 7980 setting the public hearing date. The property was posted on August 24th. There was a placard taped to the front of the building and the back, actually. A little bit of background on this. The property was inspected at PD request following a welfare check, was found to be severely dilapidated. Norma Wilson owned and lived at the property at the time of the initial inspection, but the property is currently boarded up and vacant. After that initial inspection request by the PD, we tried for quite some time to get Miss Wilson to get repairs done. She wasn't able to during that time, so we then decided to move on to this dangerous structure process. Just as a side note, this is kind of a last-ditch effort. We don't like to bring houses to here. We like to give people every single opportunity they can to make repairs before it gets to a point where the city might be tearing down houses. So that's why sometimes the timeline looks a little funny, but because we try to give every single effort we can to work with people to try and get that done. The property was auctioned at tax sale on September 21st of this year and purchased by Chris Helm. The new owner has signed a compliance agreement and plans to rehabilitate the property. So that happened, of course, after the setting public hearing date. This was just a couple weeks ago when Mr. Helm bought the property. Going through a timeline here, I've kind of gone over this stuff, but this gives direct dates of when things happened here. Report of the building dilapidation and the initial inspection was January 8th of 2020. Notice was sent to the property owner and the owner's daughter. Also on January 8th, that's just a violation notice saying that, hey, you guys need to get these repairs done. That's when we kind of start working with them. The failed foundation was noted at that time and was flagged as it could get to this level. Dangerous structure assessment was completed on May the 6th. Property was boarded up by the city on May 11th. And the notice to abate the dangerous structure was sent on May 10th. The request for public hearing, August 23rd. As I said before, the property was purchased at tax sale by Chris Helm on September 21st.
And he also signed a compliance agreement on September 21st with the deadline to complete the work of January 1, 2022. Public hearing is today. I did a drive-by curb inspection today, and there hasn't been any work, substantial work done as of yet, but Mr. Helm is working on it. If you guys have questions for him, he can definitely answer those. Moving on, these are photos of the property. This is the front yard. This property has also been cited several times for tall grass and weeds and things like that. This wasn't taken today, so it doesn't look exactly like that today. But the next picture is the north side of the building. The entire foundation wall is collapsed. It's probably about, I'd say, 10 feet wide there, and the whole it's fallen into the basement there on the north side. On the east side, it's hard to tell with all that junk that was kind of accumulated back there, but that one is collapsed too on the inside on the east side. The next picture is just looking in that collapsed foundation on the north side, how that looks there. The next picture is on the inside. There's kind of stuff stacked about halfway to the ceiling all the way through the inside of the house. The plumbing is in disrepair, is not working at this time. So none of the kitchen, restrooms, or anything like that are operational. The next picture is of a bathroom, or I guess what they used it for at that time, I'm not sure, but it was a bathroom. But anyway, there's a photo of that. Going down on the required repairs that we did, I took this off of the dangerous structure checklist. It's in state statute. There was 4 items that met there. Foundation walls on the south and east sides will need replaced. Plumbing and mechanical systems are in disrepair. Mechanical systems are in disrepair and will need to be returned to working condition. Electric and gas meters have been pulled and cannot be restored until damage is either repaired or the structure is removed. Windows and doors in the property have been boarded up to prevent entrance into the structure and will need to be repaired in order to approve occupancy. So in conclusion, the building official has determined that the structure is unsafe and dangerous. The building official therefore requests the governing body, number 1, make findings by resolution that the structure is unsafe and dangerous, direct the structure to be repaired or removed, and fix a reasonable time within the repair or removal of the structure shall be completed pursuant to KSA 12-1750. And if you go to the blue sheet that I have, I gave the, whoops, not that one. Options for the city commission. Number 1 on the options was it's the same. It reads the same as number 2. However, it gives dates that we would normally use. Usually, we give a month and then to start work, and then another month after that to finish the work. In this case, I changed number 2, and that's the one I recommend, to the dates that line up with the compliance agreement that Mr. Helm has signed with the city of Salina. It gives them a little bit more time, 81 days actually, to complete the work by January 1, 2022.
So that was option, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that was option number 2?
Yes.
The one that you're recommending?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Helm is here today. If you guys have any questions for his, plans or work with the structure. But other than that, that is the information that I have for you today. If you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Pilcher?
Right, if you could go back one slide, please. I think it's one. And I'm just comparing that with what's in the code compliance agreement. This lists 4 things. In the actual white paper resolution, there are only 2, the foundation and the plumbing. Are
right.
3 and 4, are they actually part?
3 and 4 on, if you read the actual state statute, it gives 12 items on there, and some of them are fairly similar in nature, and so I may have condensed them on there, but here I kind of split them out so it's easier to understand. The doors and windows were one thing, and the gas and electric meters is also one item on the dangerous structures checklist that was checked off. I believe that's attached in your packet that you got as well.
Right. Because I didn't see those listed on the actual, I'm assuming correct me if I'm wrong, what's written in the white pages is the actual official agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the electric, gas, and windows and doors need to be listed on that? Or is it inferred that they're included someplace else?
It's kind of inferred, but that's definitely something that we can look at and make that. So it's very possible that I would say the plumbing system is both functional. Well, it's inferred kind of in the second one there, but I can elaborate on that a little bit and make sure that it's clear.
So, Vice Mayor Davis, are you talking about, under the description of items that need ordered to be abated, that we add those
In the
other,
code compliance agreement.
the electric and gas meter
And
and windows and doors?
Yes. Excuse me.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Always good to set out our expectations clearly. Good catch. Any other questions for Mr. Pilcher? Thank you.
And maybe I heard wrong. I thought you said north and east sides of the structure was the foundation. Was it south? And I just wanted to make, it doesn't matter, I mean.
Yes, that picture is on the north side of the foundation right there.
If you go back to the next slide, it says south and east side though, on the, where we were just at. There, it says foundation walls on the south and
And
east.
it's north and east.
Okay. Well, that is a error on my part. This here.
Yeah, I just want to make
is
sure
not
we have it
a-
right on the agreement, so.
Yeah, actually, on the agreement, it doesn't specify the walls at all, or which walls. It just says you need to repair the walls so they're capable of supporting all imposed loads.
Applicant may not know the north from the south, so.
All right. Okay, if that's it for Mr. Pilcher, I would invite the applicant, if he would like to speak to any of the items that we've talked about today, to approach and speak.
Chris Helm, Salina, Kansas. This is stuff we do every day, so the last 7 years, I think we've about rehabbed 60 different properties in town. So we're pretty confident we can achieve this by the end of the year. You guys got any questions?
Those are the words I wanted to hear.
Yeah, I admire your optimism.
My question was, is that enough time from looking at the property?
It'll be enough time to get off the dangerous structure list, but finalize probably, I'd say March.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for
Thank
taking
you.
this on. Appreciate it, Mr. Helm. Are there any questions or comments from members of the public, since this is a public hearing after all? And I don't know if we don't have anyone online? Okay. Then I will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Mayor Hodges, I move we approve resolution number 21-7990 as indicated in option 1 above, but fixing times requested by property owner of 30 days for commencement on or before November 10th, 2021, and 81 days on or before January 1st, 2022 for completion of work, and authorizing staff to proceed with the demolition or repair if the owner fails to comply.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve option number 2, approving resolution number 21-7990. I did have one question. Did we want to add to the description of items that need to be ordered to be abated?
Yes.
Is it-
I do.
Are you willing to accept that addition to your motion, to include the number 3, electric and gas meters, and number 4, windows and doors.
That'd be fine, yeah.
Okay, all right, so
Thank you.
we will include items 3 and 4 on the code compliance agreement of replacing the electric and gas meters and windows and doors. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes 4-0. The consent agenda. We haven't gotten to the consent agenda yet.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of October 4, 2021.
Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes? And if not, then I would take a motion to approve.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of October 4th, 2021. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Item 7.1.
Item 7.1, second reading of ordinance number 21-11084, enacting of new city code, section 7-56.1, to supplement current section 7-56, updating the regulation of animal feces to include the requirement of a feces capturing diapering apparatus for owners and operators of horse-drawn vehicles.
Ordinance number 21-11084 was passed on first reading on October 4th, 2021. Are there any questions or comments from the commission? Are there any questions or comments from members of the public?
Norman, I will let you go before me, sir. Why? Because I like you.
You're the only one in this room does.
I think you, no, we all like Norm. Don't sell yourself short. We're pretty fond of you.
Somebody asked me Norman Mount Salina. Somebody asked me one time if I was racist. I says, yeah, I don't like people. I like horses. Anyway, I got a question about apparatus for owners and operators of horse-drawn vehicles. What about the rest of the horses that are in a parade or something?
Yeah, I posed the same question. I'm trying to remember the answer that I got. I'm remembering those animals were not included, but I couldn't sit here and give you a good explanation as
Mike wants
why.
to talk, so.
Oh, okay.
All right, shall we unmute Mr. Scragg? Yes? Okay,
He's
all
unmuted.
right, there's a consensus that we should unmute Mr. Scragg and allow him to speak.
I understand that was a tough decision. Just to recap the question and my response from last week, we currently have regulations in place that try to address horses that are in the community and owners and are responsible for cleaning up after them. This was in direct response to the horse-drawn carriage concerns that were raised in the downtown and trying to be proactive in terms of preventing the feces in the first place instead of having to cite them, catch them in the act and cite them. So we kind of have one scenario that's already in place, may not be all that workable, may not be all that practical, but animals that are in the community that are not pulling a carriage but deposit feces, that's already a code violation. This is trying to proactively require the device when you have a horse-drawn carriage situation to prevent it in the first place.
Thank you, Mr. Scragg.
And if I could add to that, I believe one other point that Mr. Scragg made last week was that the horse-drawn carriage is more likely to be, in this case, in the downtown area for a longer period of time than someone coming through for a parade, or that's probably about the only time we have horses downtown, I guess. But just the sheer number of additional hours downtown increase the risk that there would be feces that had to be picked up.
I understand keeping it
Yeah.
cleaned up, but when?
Well, and I think as Mr. Scragg mentioned, it is a code violation right now if you've got animals in parades going down the street. they are required to be cleaned up after already in our ordinances. This is just to deal proactively with the carriage owner and operator, to require them to have those abatement things in place.
As one additional clarification, we wouldn't cite someone in a parade. As part of a special event permit process, we make provision for that, and we make provision for cleaning up after the parade. It's more the instance of someone just individually riding a horse in the community, something like that.
Mr. Sreg, how do you identify which horse made the mess?
That's a really good point, which makes the point of why we're drafting this ordinance. Rather than trying to do it after the fact, we're trying to prevent the violation in the first place by requiring this of a horse and carriage operation.
So we're going to hire a scientist to do a DNA analysis.
No.
Why not?
No. Actually, Mr. Mantle, your time's up. Thank you so much.
Good question.
John Blanchard, Salina. I think the understatement of the week on this item last week was when the city manager said, Mr. Hammond drew the short straw. That was very, yes. Which leads to my point that I'd like to make here, is that we have a Salina Downtown, Inc. that is now supposed to be doing maintenance, helping with security. They have the closest eyes and ears on the street. This seems to be one of those items that it would be perfectly okay to say, as a downtown group, you guys govern this. They mentioned that somebody mentioned that they were hiring another one to come in. Well, just put it all under the umbrella of them. The other thing that I'd like to see them be in charge of, give them full responsibility of the planter beds and the planter pots downstairs or downtown. They are there all the time. You guys aren't, Parks and Rec staff aren't down there. They're the closest ones. They can tell when something needs to be done. If weeds are flowing out of the planter boxes, let Salina Downtown Inc. make the call and get those fixed. If the city has to pay for part of it, fine. But make Salina Downtown Inc. responsible for making sure that everything runs smoothly and perfectly, and not have to pull in Parks and Rec to do these types of things. I don't know if it's part of their development agreement or if it can be amended to include that, but I think you'll find more success to have Salina Downtown Inc. govern downtown more closely and take some of those headaches off of your hands. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? And I don't see anyone online, so I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 21-11084 on second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 21-11084 on second reading. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Davis?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor Hodges?
Aye, and that motion passes 4-0. Item 8.1.
Item 8.1, Lakeview Estates 2. 8.1A, first reading, ordinance number 21-11079, annexing a 34-acre tract of land located on the east side of South Ohio Street between Magnolia Road and Schilling Road. 8.1B, first reading, ordinance number 21-11080, changing the zoning district classification from Saline County AG to PDD R2.5, PDD R2, R-2.5, and C1, and approval of a preliminary development plan for an assisted living/memory care facility on an 8-acre portion of a 34-acre tract of land located between South Ohio Street and the Knox Sand Pit.
Thank you. Mr. Andrew.
I'm going to make myself comfortable here.
Don't get too comfortable.
There are three recommendations that came from the Salina City Planning Commission that are coming before you this evening that relate to a 34-acre tract of land that's located on the east side of South Ohio Street between Magnolia Road and Schilling Road. And so you can see on the map that's on the screen, that red line represents the city limit boundary, and you can see the city limit boundary goes around this property. And back in 2002, there was a county plat of this property done, and the plat was done primarily to create a 3-acre home site for Mr. Byquist, the property owner, to construct a home at the rear of the property. The remainder of the property, which was all left as Lot 1, was essentially a holding lot that wasn't intended to allow for any further development, and the Salina City Planning Commission had a condition on that no replatting of Lot 1 shall occur without annexation into the city. So we are now at a point where there's a proposal to replat, annex, and zone that front portion to the west of the lake. And so the driving force with this is that Dover Development of St. Louis, Missouri has entered into an agreement to purchase a portion of the land west of the Knox Sandpit Lake, and they plan to develop an assisted living facility and memory care facility on the site. So Mr. Byquist, who currently owns this property, has filed an application to annex both the prospective site of the assisted living facility and the remainder of the property. And so there were applications filed to annex, to rezone, to have a preliminary development plan for the assisted living facility, and a preliminary plat layout for the property. So in order for the property to access the city utilities that are in the area, the city's policy requires that this be annexed first. And so, Mr. Hers, if you could go back to the aerial photo, you can see that in the surrounding area, we have the reserves at Prairie Glen, we have a residential subdivision, we have the Stone Lake addition here, we have the Twin Oaks townhomes across the street to the west. All of those properties are within the city limits. The only part of this area that's not included in the annexation request is there's 2 small houses here on Ohio that are in separate ownership, and they are not included in this request. The city has made a number of investments in this area to help make this property developable. In 2005, there was a water line that was installed down South Ohio to connect Schilling Road with Magnolia Road and create a loop system. And because these properties were outside the city limits, there was a cost recovery charge that was set up to allow the city to recoup the cost of that as property develops. And then in 1992, the city installed an interceptor sewer line that went around the south and east portions of the city. And that green line that you see pointed to on the map, that is the interceptor sewer line that serves this portion of the city. The final investment that the city made in 1999, the city purchased the drainage storage rights in the Knox Sand Pit, which basically made that a large regional detention pond to serve a good part of South Salina. And so this property would be subject to cost recovery fees to recoup the cost of water and drainage impact fees to recoup the city's cost of purchasing storage rights in the sand pit. South Ohio Street was improved and widened, and the roadway itself annexed in 2007. As we noted, all the property, except for the property to the east surrounding this property, has already been annexed. The primary cost to the city of annexing this property would be our long-term maintenance cost associated with maintaining public streets and utilities in the annexed area. The potential benefits to the city would be additional property tax, sales tax, and franchise taxes, as well as the cost recovery fees that we would gain. The comprehensive plan shows this as a future urban residential area and as a primary service area for growth and development, and the reason for that is that the city has already extended utilities into this area. So the Planning Commission reviewed this annexation request at their September 21st meeting, and they voted to recommend to you that this 34-acre tract be annexed in the city limits in order to be able to connect to the city's water and sanitary sewer system. So as it relates to the question of annexation, you could approve the attached ordinance on first reading annexing this tract into the city. You could postpone consideration to a future meeting to allow the applicant or staff to provide you with additional information, or you could decline to approve this request, which would leave this property outside the city limits. There is a pending request for IRB financing for the assisted living facility, and for that reason, if this is approved on first reading this evening, we would schedule second reading on next Monday to allow the property to be annexed in so that it would be in the city for consideration of the financing request. So with that, I'd be open to any questions you have about the property or any of the drawings or maps we've displayed on the screen.
Any questions for Mr. Andrew?
Yep.
Any questions or comments from members of the public? And do we not have anybody with the virtual hand raised? Okay. All right, then we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or action.
Okay.
Ordinance number 21-11079.
Yeah, Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 21-11079 on first reading. Annexing, I was trying to get the exact legal description, but this 34-acre tract into the city.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 21-11079. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes 4-0, which takes us then to the next item concerning this development, item 8.1B.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. On item 8.1B, there's two recommendations that have come to you from the Planning Commission. The first relates to a request to change the zoning classification of this property to 4 different zoning classifications, and Mr. Hers has a map up on the screen, and it's a lot easier to see visually there than to try to describe, but this property here is part of the planned development district for the Cedarhurst of Salina Assisted Living Facility. This is not part of the current proposal, but what could be future development phases. This is a proposed office site at this location. This is being requested for zoning for future multifamily apartments, and this is requested for townhome zoning for townhomes that could potentially back up to the Sandpit Lake. This has been something that has been in the works for a while, just because the city has improved Ohio Street, has installed water lines, has installed an interceptor sewer line, so this property has been suitable for development for some time, but the impetus is the proposal to construct an assisted living memory care facility. And so to carry that out, the applicant is requesting the rezoning not only of that 8-acre site, but the remaining balance of the 34 acres. And so this is a request for both planned development district zoning and straight zoning as described on the map that you see on the screen. The request for the development plan for phase 1 of the assisted living facility, that involves the construction of a 70,000 square foot facility with 58 assisted living and 22 memory care apartment units, as well as the appropriate zoning for the site. The other planned development district, or the reason for that, is that Mr. Byquist has requested a reduction in the required front yard setback on the north-south street for the townhomes due to the presence of the city's interceptor sewer line in the rear yard of those lots. So you have lots that appear to be relatively deep as it relates to the lake, but the interceptor sewer line actually runs through a portion of the backyards of those lots, and so the request is to be able to move the townhomes closer to the street so that there's room to have the townhomes and possibly decks or patios at the back. So on September 21st, a public hearing was held on this request. The role of the Planning Commission was to conduct that hearing and determine whether an assisted living memory care facility and the other uses allowed under the requested zoning would be compatible with the character of this portion of the South Ohio corridor and the zoning and uses of nearby property. And so the Planning Commission concluded that the current agricultural zoning was inhibiting the use of this and development of this property. The ag zoning wouldn't allow any form of multifamily housing as is currently being proposed. So to have any sort of urban density on this property, the zoning needs to be changed from its current agricultural designation. Another aspect that was looked at was the character of the surrounding neighborhood, and the applicant believes that the uses proposed here, the two-family residential, the multifamily residential, are similar to the surrounding properties and would conform with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. So if you look to the north of this property, you have reserves at Prairie Glen Apartments, and then you also have an office building. You have the Twin Oaks townhomes across the street, and you have property that fronts on Ohio in Stone Lake that's zoned for multifamily housing. So what's being requested here is really a continuation of that pattern. This property has access to a 12-inch water main that runs along the west side of Ohio. It has access to the sanitary sewer line that runs north-south across the property, and stormwater runoff can be directed to the Sandpit Lake, which eliminates the need for any on-site detention for itself. On page 9 of your report, we just provided an overview of the traffic or trip generation that each of the uses would generate. All told, if this was fully built out, it would create a little over 1,100 vehicle trips per day that would be introduced onto Ohio Street. In visiting with the engineering staff, at 4 lanes, South Ohio is really over-designed for the amount of traffic it carries today, so adding the additional traffic load can be accommodated without any additional street improvements to Ohio. On the comprehensive plan side, this was designated as an urban residential area, which means it was hoped that there would be higher density housing here, and with the assisted living apartment lot and townhomes, that's what the applicant is proposing. As to the 8-acre site for the assisted living facility, the name of that facility is proposed to be Cedarhurst of Salina. It would occupy 8 acres in the northwest corner of the site. Again, there would be 58 assisted living dwelling units, 22 memory care dwelling units. The density would provide, there's 4,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. They're proposing a individual driveway entrance off of Ohio Street, as well as a second entrance that would connect to the side street, which we're referring to as Anchor Drive, and that may not be the final name. That will appear on the final plat, but the building would cover about 20% of the building lot. It's going to be one story tall, and it would have an exterior that is cement lap siding and a stone veneer system. All the elevations would have a pitched roof with multiple gables, and what they've tried to do is vary the setback and provide different looks because it's a very long building. They're proposing to break it up into segments and have different heights and different roof lines to provide visual interest from Ohio. They will have a porte-cochere canopy over the main entrance, which would face west towards Ohio. They're proposing 75 off-street parking spaces that would be both west and south of the facility. The amount of parking they are providing meets city requirements. One thing that was discussed at the Planning Commission and would mention here is related to fire protection. And so to serve this facility, staff and the city fire marshal has expressed a need for 2 additional fire hydrants that weren't shown on the original plan. One of them would be in the front along that entrance drive. The other one would be near the southeast driveway that comes in from Anchor Lane. Those would provide protection to the south and west parts of the building. The fire marshal has also requested that their sidewalk shown that runs along the east and north sides of the building be widened out to 12 feet and reinforced so it could support a fire apparatus vehicle to allow that to have access to within 150 feet of all points of the building. So there's already a sidewalk proposed here. The fire marshal proposed that that be widened to 12 feet in width and reinforced so it could support the weight of a fire apparatus. At the Planning Commission hearing, the developer agreed to make those modifications, but expressed concern about the grading and the proximity to the drainage ditch on the north side. And so they requested the opportunity to work with the fire marshal regarding access to the north side of the building. And so we have good coverage on this side, but when you get back to these corners, they're more remote. So the plan would be to have an extended reinforced sidewalk that would allow fire apparatus to get back to those corners. As far as their plan for landscaping, they have provided more than adequate green space area, but they're somewhat shy on the number of trees that they proposed, and so the developers agreed to submit a supplemental planting plan to provide additional tree units on their final plans. They would be allowed to have a ground sign out front that would identify their facility. So on the 21st of September, as part of the public hearing held on this item, the Planning Commission made 2 recommendations for your consideration. The first one was to rezone this site as requested by the property owner to plan development R2 for the townhomes, plan development R2.5 for the assisted living facility, R2.5 for future apartments, and C1 for an office site next to Ohio. And their findings in support of that are laid out for you on page 16. The second recommendation they made was to approve the preliminary development plan for the Cedarhurst of Salina Assisted Living Memory Care Facility, and they approved that subject to conditions and some technical corrections. Those revisions are laid out on page 17, and they include providing some additional tree units in the front yard setback areas along Ohio Street and Anchor Drive, providing a reinforced sidewalk running along the east side of the building, adding additional fire hydrants and placing those in public utility easements as requested by the Director of Utilities and the Fire Marshal, and then also showing the location of fire hydrants that would be installed along Anchor Drive, which is on the south border of the building. They will need to finalize their plans for public water and sewer extensions before they can begin construction. And so They're requesting that a final development plan for their Phase 1 be submitted to and approved by the zoning administrator prior to issuance of a building permit rather than the planning commission. And their conditions would include, if they did a Phase 2 or Phase 3, those would come back to the planning commission for further review of those phases. And then the final condition was that development of this site would be completed in substantial conformance with the approved final development plan, landscape plan, and building elevations, which essentially means that they couldn't deviate from what they're presenting or you're reviewing this evening without it coming back for further review. So your options as relates to this item, if you concur with the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission, you could approve the attached ordinance rezoning this 34-acre tract of land as requested. If you disagree with the Planning Commission's recommendation, you could return this item together with your reasons for the disagreement. You could postpone consideration to a future meeting date to allow the applicant or staff to provide additional information, or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and deny this Plan Development District application, provided there are 4 votes in support of that denial. As to the preliminary development plan for Cedarhurst of Salina, the conditions relating to that are incorporated into the ordinance that's attached to today's agenda, so you would not have to take a separate action on that unless you wanted to identify specific things. So you could approve the plan and the ordinance as proposed, or you could approve it subject to minor revisions, or you could send it back to the Planning Commission to allow major revisions to be made to the plan. So with that, I'd be open to any questions. There's a lot of information and drawings here, but the 2 questions are, should the zoning of this property be changed from agricultural to the classifications being requested? And then the second part deals with the development plan for the assisted living facility and whether you believe that plan should be submitted or approved as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Questions? I did just have a couple, and you know that I always like to ask about fire access, so I'm sure you were anticipating that. I guess my first question is probably for Mr. Andrew or for the developer in terms of when is Anchor Lane to the south of the development? What's the proposed completion of that, since that provides the second entrance?
Yes, I think I can address the phasing part of this. So the first phase of this development, now, Mr. Hers, if you could go back to the overall plan and I can lay that out. So the first phase is there's a water line on the west side of Ohio. So in their first phase, they're going to bring a water line down Anchor Drive, down Boy Lane, and tie it in to the water distribution system in Stone Lake. So right off Phase 1, they're going to put that loop in for fire protection with 2 sources of flow. They're going to bring Anchor Drive into this point right here and terminate it, which will be past their driveway. And
Okay.
so this will be Phase 1. It will include that section of Anchor Drive, which will be constructed as part of this and as part of the water line. And then they're going to run a sewer line from the facility over to this interceptor sewer. So when they get around to the second phase, the loop for water will already be in, and they'll extend the
Right.
street, and they'll tie in these lots to the sewer, but the water line loop and the paved access and Anchor Drive will be built as part of Phase 1.
Okay, good. So Anchor Drive will incorporate the 2
Yes, they will not just have the driveway on Ohio, they'll have the 2
Right.
ways.
Gotcha, okay. My other question was, and maybe I misunderstood this, but you had said something about the Planning Commission requesting those 12-foot wide reinforced concrete sidewalks, and is that has that been agreed to, or,
What the developer requested, and the developers here and can explain that, was that staff's recommendation was that there be a complete 12-foot reinforced sidewalk loop all the way around the building.
Gotcha.
And the engineer working for the developer questioned whether there was sufficient room and the grading would allow for a 12-foot wide reinforced road there. So the Planning Commission said they're recommending requiring the road up to this corner, and then at the request of the developer, said the developer would like to work with the fire marshal on options for getting coverage to this side of the building that might not include a full loop.
okay,
And so we do have Mr. Long here tonight, and he could speak to that. But at the request of the developer, the Planning Commission only required the reinforced sidewalk to this point here, because it was unclear whether there was sufficient room and the grading would allow to actually have a 12-foot roadway there. So that was left to be worked out between the developer and the fire marshal as to getting the coverage to all points of the north side of that building.
okay. So I guess my next question would probably be best directed to Fire Marshal Long in terms of fire apparatus vehicles being able to make that 90-degree turn. Is that's navigable?
Actually wouldn't be the intent.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about emergency access and places like that. The code is very unspecific about some alternative means that allow you. The alternative, number one, the code allows you to extend that 150 feet if you have a building that's fully sprinkled. This building is fully sprinkled with a 13 system throughout. We did add the 2 extra fire hydrants. They talk about what they say is an alternative means. And an alternative means is our intention is to make sure we have firefighting protection around the entire building. So that's the intent of having that road within 150 feet of all points, because we have fire lines pre-connected on our trucks that are 150 foot long. So the intention would be to be able to make that. So an alternative means, like the code talks about, and some of the things they state in here include standpipes, automatic sprinkler systems, remote fire department connections. That's what we've talked to the developers about, putting in some, what they would be as dry standpipes. So we could connect onto them down the side of the building, so they would poke out the side of the building. We could connect onto them, and they would give us an effective firefighting stream to put fires out on the outside of that building. So the reason for that access is to have an effective firefighting stream. So by adding these standpipes, we could effectively accommodate that.
So you'd feel good about the coverage on the north side of the development?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Long?
So Troy, Mr. Long, just to verify and clarify, the idea is to have standpipes here so that you could bring your hoses over, attach to the standpoint or to the standpipe, and then go either west or south to fight the fire from there.
Yes.
This would be your water supply for that northeast corner of that building.
North and east, actually, if you want it, because we could do it on both sides.
Okay.
The east and the north.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
welcome.
All right. It looks like we have the applicant here. Would you like to approach the commission and speak?
Sure. Nick Dwyer with Dover Development. And just to circle back and touch on that, we talked about the fire access at the last Planning Commission meeting. Since then, we've had conversations with Troy and the fire department. So I just wanted to be clear. what we've talked to about with Troy is doing those standpipe connections on the north and east side of the building. And so there would not, our intention, and after our conversations with Troy, there would not be a fire access widened sidewalk around the back. There would be a standpipe connection on the far east and the north side.
Will there be just like a standard sidewalk then to circumnavigate the facility? Okay.
And part of the reason being is there's residential apartments, and that's where the folks' private porches would be, just to maintain that residential feel for the residents, so.
Thank you very much. It's very, yeah.
But we can get into the presentation on Cedarhurst and what we do, and just to give you guys kind of an overview on what we do. So, like I said, Nick Dwyer with Dover Development and Cedarhurst Senior Living. Dover is the real estate development arm of a larger senior housing organization based out of St. Louis. So we serve seniors throughout the Midwest. We own and operate over 50 communities within Missouri, Kansas, Illinois, Kentucky, Michigan, Florida, Georgia. So we're kind of all over the Midwest and the Southeast. We're excited about this project. This is a rendering of the community. We've been working over the last couple of years to come up with a new building design that's taken a lot of feedback from our residents and staff. So we're actually under construction on a similar design in Topeka, Kansas, and then Salina will be the second one to benefit from this new design. So like I mentioned, we're a full-service senior living provider throughout the Midwest, over 54 communities to date. We serve about 3,000 residents and have about 2,500 staff members throughout our community. So what you'll see across our communities, each building is staffed by a care-centered staff, including nurses, administrators, dining, housekeeping, property managers, as well as folks who are skilled in memory care services for folks who suffer from Alzheimer's and dementia. So this community specifically will have 52 assisted living apartments and 22 memory care apartments. As Dean mentioned, it's a one-story building design, which seniors really tend to like. Obviously, there's no stairs or elevators that they have to navigate. It's a similar design to, like I mentioned, the one we're working on in Topeka, Kansas. It's about 70,000 square feet. We actually partner with a physical therapy provider, so they'll house some space in the building as well to bring services to the residents as needed. Other amenities, movie theater, salon. Each apartment on the assisted living side of the building will have a private porch off the apartment. There's also a spa and then 2 exterior courtyards, which you saw on the site plan. So those are just some shots of other buildings that we've built to date. And here are some exterior renderings of the new facility. As you can see, it's sort of a modern farmhouse look that we feel like folks in the area will really tend to like. So, and these are just some shots of other buildings we've completed over the last couple of years. You'll see some common area amenity spaces, an exterior courtyard with a pergola, and just some, we've got a shuffleboard table in there, some seating. Up top left, you'll see the restaurant-style dining room. This community will actually have multiple restaurant-style dining spaces. And then you'll see some shots of folks' apartment there, bedroom, bathroom, and then just a common area living room. And then these are just some additional renderings of this new specific building design. As Dean mentioned, I just wanted to hit home that, we hope that this project is very successful, which will lead to multiple phases. We envision, hopefully, once we get our boots on the ground, our staff in the building, and they can kind of get a feel from residents, get some feedback, hopefully come back and do maybe some senior cottages or townhomes, villa style, on the back of the building, utilize some of that extra ground back there. Just some highlights on what we hope to bring to the city. Like I mentioned, it's a fully staffed building. It'll have around 50 employees with over $1.5 million of annual payroll. And that includes directors, sales staff, caretakers, nurses, kitchen staff, all the way down to property managers and maintenance men. So. And then we do actually have a construction company that we work with. they're sort of a sister company of ours, but they're very experienced in building these types of facilities. And, we hope to actually bring a lot of construction jobs and business for local subcontractors as well. So that's my presentation, but happy to answer any other questions you guys might have about Cedarhurst and kind of our project.
Just kind of a late question, just had something to do with the emergency access. For an ambulance call, is it presumed that the residents in that north and east side would be removed from the interior courtyard up to the front entrance, or was that designed to reach those units?
Definitely, if an ambulance were to be called, they would come in off of Ohio, off of our main entrance there, and they would, loop around under the porte-cochere, and the staff would be waiting for the ambulance there.
So they would,
with that resident.
so they would come through the courtyard or whatever, from the ends, they would not be expected to go around the back on the north or east side to individual units?
No, an ambulance,
Okay.
no. Yeah, they would most likely meet them up at the front, and hopefully by that point, the
Just bring
staff
them in.
already has that resident there waiting for them.
Well, we definitely need shouldn't say the beds, we need the homes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. We definitely try to maintain a residential feel. We want this to feel like a residence home. Most folks are moving out of their homes coming into our communities, so, we pride ourselves on, all the apartments are individual. We don't do a lot of shared units. Each, folk will have their own living room, bedroom, bathroom, and we just make sure that we've got the staff on site to provide care as needed, and each resident will have their own sort of tailored care plan to go with that, so.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Any further questions? What's your timeline on this?
We're hoping to get, all the stuff wrapped up with the city here in the next several months. And then if weather allows, as we get into winter, hopefully get out and start doing some stuff on site. Some of the public improvements that we talked about earlier, the road extension, the water line, sewer line, get all that, and then hopefully start going vertical, early next year.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate you being here today.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Stan Byquist, 2601 South Ohio. Thank you for taking the time to hear us here. I hope you would approve this. It's been a long time in the works. I've been looking for an anchor like this to get this area started, and I think this is the perfect one and has a great need for this town. And I hope you agree with the rest of the zoning request on the other property. Multifamily, townhome, it's all needed. And with that, I'd try and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Byquist?
And maybe I missed it in here, but at one point, I remember talking about that area being developed and remember something about a floodplain. Has this property been taken out of the floodplain then?
Yeah, it's probably the most dramatic rise in the 100-year floodplain that we've seen in the community, but under the old 1986 maps, this property was like 3 to 4 feet below the projected 100-year flood elevation, and on the new maps, it's not in the floodplain at all. And so no portion of this property is in the map floodplain, so that was one of the bigger changes from the 1986 map to the remapping that occurred in 2018.
I just kind of remember that, but I live just on the other side of Ohio, and I don't ever remember seeing it flooding, so but in my mind, I still had that it was in the floodplain, so thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of the public? And Mr. Hers, do we have anyone raising their virtual hand?
Madam Mayor, I do not see anybody.
Thank you very much.
I just had one clarification as I reconsulted with Mr. Long, that in the discussions about alternative means and methods that he has undertaken with the Dover Development Group, on page 2 of the ordinance, there was a condition that the Planning Commission had that was incorporated into the ordinance that you're considering today. It's subsection C, 2 that says that a preliminary development plan shall be revised to show a 12-foot sidewalk running along the east side of the building capable of supporting 75,000 pounds in order for fire apparatus to have access. And with the dry standpipe that's being proposed by the fire department and the developers, there's no longer a need, according to Mr. Long, to have that along the east side of the building. And having it there just creates some situation where if you run a fire apparatus road up there, you have to have a place for the fire apparatus to turn around, and there really isn't one. So based on the additional discussions that occurred between the fire department and the designers for this project, it appears to me that subsection C2 could be eliminated from the ordinance as a condition, as no longer being needed because of alternative means and methods to provide the fire protection to those sides. So if there were an action to approve this ordinance, if the city commission so chose, they could delete that condition from the planning commission, because in the subsequent discussions between the fire department and the developers, it looks like there's an alternative to having that fire apparatus road.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew. All right, would anybody like to take a swing?
Yep, if you, you want to go?
Mayor, I move we approve on first reading ordinance number 21-11080, changing the zoning district classification from Saline County AG Agriculture to PDD R2.5, PDD R2, R2.5, and C1, and approval of a preliminary development plan for an assisted living memory care facility on an 8-acre portion of a 34-acre tract of land located between South Ohio and Knox Sandpit, and removing section C2, eliminating that as a condition with alternate solutions provided.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 21-11080, removing from the ordinance section 3.
3C2.
3C2. All those in
I heard C2.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0.
Okay.
All
We
right.
will-
Thank you very much for being here this evening, gentlemen. Item 8.2.
Item 8.2, first reading, ordinance number 21-1105, requesting a change in zoning district classification from PDD district to C1 district to PDD C3 district for property located at 104 East Magnolia Road, directly south of the former JCPenney store, and approval of an amended preliminary final development plan to allow construction of an Atwell Suites hotel.
Mr. Andrew.
So you're getting to have 2 planned development districts and 2 development plans, as well as a zoning request on your agenda tonight. So this, as with the last application, this is a 2-part request. The first part is just for the commission's benefit, dating back to the very original Central Mall Planned Development District that was approved in 1982. That plan showed that the outlots between what is formerly the JCPenney store, Magnolia Road, were set aside for office complex development, and so they had a C1 zoning classification. The new owners of the Central Mall are interested in repurposing the mall, trying to take a focus on more of an entertainment center as opposed to purely retail, so they identified these outlots as a potential site for a hotel. And since the C1 district does not allow the construction of hotels, they're first permitted in the C3 district, there's a request to change the underlying zoning of these outlots from C1 to C3. Along with that, there was a plan, and I don't know if Mr. Hers has that to show on the screen, but there was an approved plan that showed office buildings on this site that he has highlighted in a red circle there. And so an amended plan for those outlots has been submitted by Bieberly Architects, and it proposes the construction of an Atwell Suites hotel that would be 4 stories in height and have 80 rooms. The proposed hotel is 47.8 or 47 feet 8 inches tall, which exceeds the 35-foot height limitation in the C3 district. So they are requesting that you approve a modification to that height limit. The other thing I would point out is Mr. Hoppick raised the question on the previous item about the floodplain. This property is in the mapped 100-year floodplain, and as such, there are minimum elevation requirements that they'll have to meet in terms of elevating the lowest floor of this hotel 1 foot above the 100-year flood elevation. So the vast majority of the Central Mall retail site and even the outlots along 9th Street are zoned C3. These are an exception because they were designed to have an office buffer between the mall and the housing and the church to the south. The use that's being requested is a hotel, motel, and the only modification that's being requested is an exception to the 35-foot height limit to allow this to be a 4-story hotel with 47 feet 8 inches height. By way of comparison, the Holiday Inn that's on South 9th Street outside of Lowe's is also in a C3 district, and the City Commission approved a similar height exception for that building, which is also in the neighborhood of 47 feet tall in a district that allows 35 feet. So the mall owners point out the fact that this has been zoned for office use since 1982, and there's been no interest at all in establishing any office buildings or office uses there. As you get over towards 9th Street, you have C3 and C5 zoning. And so given the amount of time that this has remained vacant since the 1980s, it certainly seems a case could be made that the C1 zoning is inhibiting the development of this site compared to similarly situated outlots at the mall. Certainly a hotel motel would fit in with all the retail that remains at the mall and with the restaurants on the outlots surrounding the mall. The public utilities, including sanitary, sewer, water, gas, and electric, are in place to serve this. And so this is part of the mall proper and part of the commercial land use classification. So I think we have some site plan information about the hotel site itself. It's a little over 3 acres. Access would be from the private ring roads that enter the mall. All of those roads are private. There's no individual access proposed or allowed off of Magnolia Road itself. The building would be oriented to run east to west, paralleling Magnolia Road. The luggage drop-off area and main entrance would be on the west side, facing the west access road. The hotel features a garden and outdoor swimming pool on the southwest side of the building. The hotel itself would only occupy about 9% of the lot, so a substantial portion of this lot would still remain as green space. The building itself is 4 stories tall. It would have an ephes-type exterior, which has a similar appearance to stucco, and that's a very common exterior building material for hotels and motels in Salina. They have provided an adequate number of parking spaces for their guests. They're not proposing any conference rooms or restaurants or anything that would add to their parking needs. They've got a 10 by 60 dedicated loading and unloading area for receiving food and supply shipments on the west side of the building. and they're proposing landscaping and buffering on the sides surrounding the building. The Central Mall restrictions don't allow outlots to have individual pole signs, so this would be limited to a ground sign plus a sign mounted on the building. You can correct me, Mr. Hers, but I think we discussed at Planning Commission meeting that this elevation would appear to show this sign facing north towards the District Eat and Play, and it's actually intended to be on this side of the building facing west. Is that correct?
Correct. It'll be on the west side according to the project designer.
So the Planning Commission conducted a hearing on this on September 7th, 2021, and they voted to recommend approval of application PDD 81-4P, including the requested variation to the building height limit. And they had recommended the conditions that are on page 12 of your report, and those deal with site drainage, with the need to elevate this site and have the elevation confirmed before they begin vertical construction, limiting signage to a monument sign, and just requiring, again, that what is presented this evening is what gets built, and if it changes, then it would come back for your further consideration. So this is coming to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission. The ordinance that's attached would rezone these 3 lots from C1 to C3, and also would include the conditions related to the development plan for the hotel itself. And so you could approve the attached ordinance on first reading this evening, including the building height variation. If you disagree with the Planning Commission, you could send it back to them with the reasons for your disagreement. You could postpone consideration this evening to a future meeting if you feel like additional information is needed, or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and leave the C1 zoning in place. So with that, again, the development plan is linked to the ordinance, and so if you approve the attached ordinance, you'd be approving the development plans for this hotel.
Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Any questions for staff?
I have, I don't know if it's a question, but a comment. I believe the traffic for this hotel will be less than when we had Penny's and it was going, was occupied, and mainly during the holiday seasons. The concern I have about this location, and it's not with the actual hotel, but it's the entrances off Magnolia. And this is just thoughts for the city in the future, is I have a real concern about that west entrance that lines up with Highland Avenue. That's a real dangerous intersection when people, because it's fairly close to 9th Street, when people are coming off and turning left, or when people are trying to come out of that and then turn to go east onto Magnolia. At some point, I would almost like to see that become a right turn only, and the street to the east actually have maybe a stoplight. That's just food for thought, because I've been in that area. It just seems like there's I don't know, and again, a traffic study might be beneficial.
No, I am right there with you. I am 100% right there with you.
If you reviewed the Planning Commission meeting, you'll see there was more discussion about that than the hotel itself.
Okay, well, good. I didn't watch it.
So in the minutes, that's reflected, and one of the things we discussed, and it could certainly be on your radar as well, but we discussed with the Planning Commission that is a very good topic for a separate study session, to just focus on that intersection, to gather additional information about. We're really, one of our difficulties there is that if you take Ohio Street, for instance, the right-of-way profile in Ohio Street's 100 feet of right-of-way for a 4-lane street. This is 80 feet of right-of-way for a 4-lane street, so the options for adding turn lanes and things are limited by right-of-way constraints in the ditch on the north side, and so there's if you can't add lanes or change, ideally, you'd have a separate left turn lane there, but I don't think there's the right of way to do that. So that is what we suggested with the Planning Commission, is that the actual volumes coming out of there today are probably less than when the mall was in peak operation. However, they were concerned from the standpoint of out-of-town visitors and guests, maybe that not being a desirable intersection for them as the primary means to get into the hotel site. So that would be staff's response, that it's not specifically whether the hotel gets built there or not, that intersection is still a problem. And so that, it seemed like that would be a good topic for a study session, so that some base information could be provided, and then commissioners could explore different alternatives to how that could, it can't be expanded very much, but there might be ways to change the direction of flow or limit turning movements, or making.
And again, like I said, I agree, if the Planning Commission made those comments, I don't think the traffic from adding the hotel is as significant as it was when Penny's was there, but if something goes into that Penny's location, then we could have a real problem. So I do just wanted to throw that out there. I'm glad to hear I wasn't the first one to think of that.
No, and I'm sorry to have interrupted you on that, but as someone who gets caught on that Century Plaza Drive, wanting to make a left turn onto Magnolia very frequently, ideally, at least in my opinion, this would be a conversation that happens concurrently with the development of the hotel. Again, I don't have a problem with the rezone and the hotel going in there, but I was looking at this with my husband last night, and even if you straightened up that kind of acute angle right there, Dustin, where you've got your cursor, and you made so that there was a right turning lane off of Century Plaza Drive heading west. You had the option for traffic to go straight onto Highland, and then if you had another lane for traffic to go east on Magnolia. I'm a much more aggressive driver than a lot of people are in this community, and I can't tell you how many times I've been caught behind somebody who's trying to make a left onto Magnolia, and they just quite can't get their courage up. And if you add in out-of-towners who are not familiar with the traffic patterns, I just think that we're going to take an intersection that already has some issues, and we're just going to compound those issues. I did see in the Planning Commission minutes that commissioners had asked about traffic statistics. Do we have any sense on whether that?
Well, again, that's why we discussed, possibly setting aside or having a specific study session to look at that intersection, what the options were. One of the things we weren't armed with at the time and aren't armed with is just accident statistics from that intersection that we could provide to both you and the Planning Commission, and then not just the statistics, but also the nature of the accidents, whether they were related to left turns, right turns, rear ends, those types of things. I think staff owes that to both commissions just to get a better picture of that, but we pointed that out at the Planning Commission meeting, that it's just wide enough to make people think that there's both a left-hand and right turn lane, but it's not marked, it's not clearly denoted, and so some people think that there's a right out lane and a left turn lane, and some people go right to the center and don't leave room for somebody to make a turn. But there's probably more opportunity to do things here than there are out here because of the right-of-way constraints. The other thing that that makes it a little more complicated is, at one time this was a public street, and then it got vacated, and so we have to go back and and retrace this to who owns what and who's responsible for what, but it seems reasonable to get in touch with the mall owners and say, if you want to put a hotel here, we would like to discuss with you options for improving that intersection as you described.
Is that something that we can attach to the, I'm assuming the motion to go forward with this PDD is to?
Yeah, there's,
ask
we
staff?
have the recommended conditions and the conditions in the ordinance, and those they're in the blue sheet on page 12, and they're incorporated into ordinance. But if there was a condition that that you want to impose that is as part of the construction of the hotel, that the mall owners will work with staff to reconfigure or come up with a reconfiguration of the Century Plaza Drive Magnolia intersection to accommodate all the turning movements that are anticipated by hotel guests.
Because from looking at this and from your comments, I guess you're basically saying that we would be asking them to perhaps deed over or to, on part of that ground, to help widen Century Plaza Drive down there.
Yeah, I think what Mayor Hodges was pointing out, that the best opportunity for doing something or widening would be over in here, if you got that wide enough so you'd have a right turn lane, a straight lane, and a left.
But all we would
turn
be
lane.
asking the hotelier to do is to give up part of that ground for us to be able to widen that. Is that correct?
Yes, to work with.
There would be no cost to them. It would basically be to the cost of the city.
Well, right now, it's part of researching the ownership and everything, but from this point here, that's all.
Is that private?
That's all owned by Central Mall.
I thought you said it was vacated.
It's vacated right away, so it's now private property.
Okay.
And so, in fact, those modifications would be the obligation of Central Mall, not the city, unless the city commission wants to essentially agree that those should be public improvements. So.
I just really feel like we're going to either, as Commissioner Hoppick suggested, a traffic light at the intersection that's further to the east, or reconfiguring this in some respect. And I would think that Central Mall ownership, if that's a condition that's put on, making the best possible use of that land, I think that they would be more than supportive of creating a safer environment for their patrons and for the hotel. So if the other commissioners are okay with it, I would love to see that we adopt item F on the list of conditions for the Century Plaza Magnolia Drive, or Magnolia Street intersection.
I guess I don't agree with that. I don't think
Okay.
it's fair to the mall or the hotel developer to delay this now. I think it's reasonable, the staff's recommendation to have a study session about it's reasonable, and then
Okay.
trying to go forward to find a solution. This thing's been a problem since they built the mall,
Mm-hmm.
and even when Penny's there, but it used to be full, and great deal more traffic at all times. So it doesn't seem fair to me,
Yeah, I would-
especially in the condition the mall is at the present time.
Is there a way to suggest a date or a point in construction by which this should be resolved? Because I just see this as something, if we don't put some deadline on it now, time will go by, it won't be addressed. There'll be bad accidents, people won't be able to get in or get out. And then we'll be trying to reconfigure that after the hotel property's already built out. That's a nightmare intersection coming out. And I think, with people who aren't familiar with the timing of traffic coming off of 9th Street, we'll be stuck because, was that Century Drive? I always forget that street has a name. Century Plaza Drive. Even if you have 3 lanes, if those 3 lanes aren't of sufficient length, you only need two cars in each one, and and you're stuck behind them.
Yeah.
I agree with not holding up the
Right.
development process,
Same.
but I don't see why this can't be a concurrent process with some sense of urgency.
Well,
I mean, as far as urgency in these matters exists.
it is not uncommon, whether it's on a building permit project or something that comes to the commission, to have conditions that are associated with the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the use. So one option would be to have a condition that, that modifications to that intersection would need to be made prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy for the hotel. That allows the project to move forward, but it puts a condition on it that those modifications need to be made before the hotel is occupied and operating. That is one way to deal with it from a timing standpoint.
And I'm assuming, practically speaking, that's at least a year.
I would imagine, yes.
And I'm fine with that if the other commissioners are. I don't want to hold up this project in any way, but we do have the ideal time right now to deal with a problematic intersection, and we kind of have some momentum on this project and a catalyst for doing it. So, I mean, if that's something that would be palatable to the other commissioners,
Certainly is with me.
If you wanted to add anything.
Well, I'd like to hope it works. It seems to me like we're strong-arming the mall property owners with the situation that they
Well,
didn't create.
We can work with them. I mean, we
Proved
can,
this at one time in the past, the ingress and egress here.
yeah, and we've probably got the accidents to prove that it wasn't thought out well, or the near accident. I mean, I think a lot of people don't go there anyway because they know how bad it is. I'll go all the way around out the other south end of the mall just to avoid that.
I guess we haven't asked for public comment on this item yet, and I kind of got deep into the discussion here. Is there anyone here in the room or virtually who would like to comment on this issue of the hotel rezone? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission for action. I'll make the motion.
Well, I'm trying to think how.
Okay. Mayor, I move approval on first reading ordinance 21-11085. I'll just read the long version. Requesting a change in zoning district classification from PDD C1 district to PDD C3 district for property located at 104 East Magnolia Road, directly south of the former J.C. Penney store, and approval of an amended preliminary final development plan to allow construction of an Atwell Suites Hotel with the addition, and I really don't know how to word this, of resolution of any traffic concerns at the intersection
Or would
of
you
Plaza.
just put with improvements to
Improvement to the traffic.
traffic flow
Flow.
on, from Centennial Plaza Drive onto Magnolia?
Thank you.
How's that sound?
Perfect.
Okay.
Before-
I'll
And that
second.
would be before the, does that have to have before the
Prior to the
Certificate of
issuing the
occupancy.
Before the certificate of
certificate of
occupancy.
occupancy?
Second?
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second that's going to be very difficult for me to repeat. To approve resolution number 21-11085 with the following condition added, that reconfiguration of the Century Plaza Drive and Magnolia Road intersection be done prior to a certificate of occupancy being issued. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes 4-0. Other business?
Just short, former Commissioner Blanchard did mention something that maybe we should consider, which is sort of unifying the maintenance of the downtown planters, or at least have set, propose some options. Just does seem like there's sort of a dual maintenance. And the two agencies could share resources, but just to have,
Yeah, we certainly could
simpler
look into
system.
that. You know, right now, our agreement with SDI just requires them to do the planners. It doesn't require them to do anything additional. So I mean, just the standalone. So
Isn't there a contracted entity that also works on some of
there
that
is,
maintenance?
there is, and actually, I think it's probably the same company that's doing the maintenance for us, that's doing the planters as well.
and it may well be the way it,
Tighter coordination between Parks Rec and contractor and SDI that we could get to.
Yeah, we can certainly look into it. I'm not sure that they would do it without, I mean, right now, we'd probably have to pay them more, pay SDI more if they were going to take on more maintenance.
And SDI, and I
Of course,
know
our
the
current agreement.
SDI is taking over maintenance downtown and those beds. I'm not sure that the one person they have would be enough to do all the beds also, so.
No, and they contract, I mean, they contract to do the standalone.
SDI does, so yeah.
So their one person does kind of stuff all over the place,
Right.
sweeping up and
So
cleaning.
we'd have to enter into some kind of an agreement with SDI and probably for, obviously.
At least we'd have to fund them at a different level than we do currently.
Right,
If we're going
right.
to require them to do more work.
and it may well be what we have now is actually the best. It'd be nice just to see what we have and if it needs to be made more efficient. It may turn out that what we have now
Well,
is.
I know at one point, there was concern that the individual maybe working for SDI did not have the expertise on the different plants, and so that at one point was a concern, that somebody like you and I might get a flower confused with a weed or vice versa, so those were the kind of things. So, but I think it's worth discussing, and I do know that at one point, some of the maintenance of the ground level planters was falling behind downtown, so. Another study session?
I have a question for you, because you would probably, have they named an executive director yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, because I think that that's a good discussion to have as you're having a new.
I believe
executive-
they thought they had one, and that person took a job somewhere else out of
Okay,
town. so.
okay, so, I just have one very quick item, and I just wanted to give a shout out to our new media team of David Hawksworth and Cash Hollister. People at home may have noticed, we're now doing the broadcasting ourselves, but even more importantly than that, I think, is that Cash and David, I don't know whether they're working separately or together, but you're going to be seeing social media posts that have the commission's agenda, that have a lot of good programming and features, and I just wanted to let them know. I've noticed it. I think it's a really good way to engage people, and I want to thank them for just jumping in with both feet and getting it done. That's all I have.
Very good.
Are they the one that are doing Facebook posts that also, like, we're
Yes.
telling people that the grace period for the trash collections
Yes.
is ending?
Well, we also have our E3 coordinators making posts as well, but the new posts that are like kind of specific to city commission, they're doing a little video kind of beforehand that says this is what's on the agenda coming up. That's all Cash and David. And they're doing a great job. We've got, I'll provide some statistics at some point that shows how much we're increasing our viewership. We're already seeing lots of different likes and uses.
Well, they
added
haven't been
users,
doing that long.
subscribers, I guess.
They were getting their feet underneath them for quite a while and dealing, tweaking things, so, yeah. I know when we made the change, I know at least my thought process is we were going to be able to do what they're starting to do, and that is to reach out and do a little bit more programming on behalf of the city, so,
Engagement,
yeah, so.
All right. If that's it, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.